Scott, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I read an article on Wrestling Inc. talking about the steady decline in WWE non-televised live events and the increase in wrestler injuries in the last 2 years. And I wondered what purpose these live events serve today. Back in the days before the internet, I understood that they were necessary to keep people interested and current on storylines and feuds and a way for wrestlers to make extra money and sell merchandise. But today you have 3 weekly TV shows, at least 1 pay-per-view per month, and the occasional network special. Combine that with WWEshop.com, which is open 24/7 to sell merch and all the social media platforms that WWE can use to get information out to the fans. The house shows serve no point. Doing away with them would not only help keep wrestlers healthy, increase morale, and save WWE money, because let's face it, they're not raking in the money on these house shows. And maybe it would help live TV audience numbers go up and make those European tours more bearable if the wrestlers are not constantly on the road before and after the long 2 weeks doing house shows overseas. What do you think? Scott, I love you. You make some good points, but there is so many flaws in what you just said. I have to crack my knuckles here before I answer this. First of all, you mentioned improving wrestler morale by getting rid of all the house shows. Taking money out of someone's pocket, that's a pretty bad way to boost morale. Now, to say that WWE's house show system is antiquated, it is an antiquated system. That is 100% accurate. It is antiquated, and they do need to scale back on the number of live events. There's too many of them, I agree. But to say that they serve no purpose, that's where you lose me. That's just not true. And to completely abolish them, you're not even advocating scaling back. You're saying just get rid of them altogether. To completely abolish them is a terrible idea. Let's first run through what's true, okay, about what you said. Is there less of a need to be on the road 200 days or 250 days a year with house shows because of all the TV that the company has? Yes. Do they have more avenues now and platforms to sell merch? Yes. Would eliminating house shows keep wrestlers healthier and less injury prone? Or prone to injuries on the road? Yes. Would it save WWE money? Here's where things fall apart. If WWE was losing money running house shows, guess what? They wouldn't do house shows anymore. House shows, they're generally no frills, right? You don't really get pyro, unless it's a special show at Madison Square Garden or something like that. They rent the building, they show up, they do a bunch of matches, very little in the way of angles and storylines, and they move on to the next town. Attendance is down. They don't sell out much of the time, but they still make money on these shows. So to infer that they're losing money running them just isn't true. But there's 3 more reasons why they will not get rid of house shows. They may scale back, but they will not ever get rid of house shows. First, you would have a lot of wrestlers raising hell if they ever did that, because it would be less income for them. But also, the value of those house shows for the talent is that it gives them the chance to go out in front of an audience, even if it's only a couple of thousand people, and try new things. Whether it's a comedy spot that they try that ends up getting over and they use it on television, or a new move, or some other kind of big spot. The house shows a lot of times are a barometer for what works and what doesn't. And if they try something and it doesn't work, they may never try it again. If it gets over, it may be something they can use on TV. House shows, I'm sure most people listening to this have been to a house show at some point. And if you haven't been, house shows are far more laid back than the TV shows are. For the talent, there's no script. They don't have to get to the building 8 hours early and read the script for their promo or for their segment. There's no commercial breaks to have to worry about where they have to pause in the middle of their matches. You've got more time in the ring. You've got more time to go out there, laid back, loosey-goosey type of environment, and just work. When Batista came back in 2014, Big Dave, right? Mr. Hollywood. He didn't have to work house shows if he didn't want to. He insisted on it. He didn't want to come back just for TV or for pay-per-view. He wanted, if I'm going to come back, his attitude was, I'm back. I'm back full time. That means I'm on the road working house shows. Because they're fun. These guys get to play off the crowds a lot more at house shows than they're allowed to do on television. Television's very constrained. Chris Jericho was the same way a few years ago, and he went away for a while, and then they started, wanting to bring him back, and he started working matches again for WWE. He didn't want to be on television at all. It was not his intent to go back on TV at all. He only wanted to work house shows. So he did, until they eventually wanted him back on TV, and they got their way. If you get rid of the house shows, the people who never make it onto TV won't have any place to work. Or when they call somebody up early who's still green and very inexperienced, but maybe they're not really ready for prime time yet, how are they ever going to get better without being able to work the non-TV events against people who are better than them? Also, they travel to cities for some of these shows that they would never, ever run for TV. Maybe it's in smaller venues that just aren't TV ready. Some places are small enough, they may not even have a building big enough to warrant them doing a Raw or a Smackdown. But it allows the company to travel to some of these smaller towns that otherwise they probably would never set foot in. They would just completely abandon them. Hardly a way to cultivate a base of fans if you never run shows in their town. Eliminating house shows will not make a lick of difference to your point about, maybe it'll help TV ratings. It will not matter one iota to the television ratings if they get rid of house shows. Or if anything, it might have a negative impact. But in terms of raising the number, I don't see what the correlation there is. I see no reason why TV numbers would go up if they suddenly ditched all the house shows. Even big names from the past that they trot out there hardly make any difference anymore in the TV ratings. Getting rid of the live events is not going to have any impact on that. But in 2020, I think they do need to overhaul their schedule, and they have to run fewer events because the way they run these people on the road is inhumane, especially around those overseas tours that you mentioned. Working Raw, going right to the airport for 2 weeks in Europe, a different city every night. Sometimes to come back to the States after those 2 weeks are over, and guess what? You go right to the next Raw show. Because now you got to go do TV. You can't even go home. Before you can even think about going home, you got to fly to Raw. If you're on the Raw roster, you got to fly to Raw. And then when they're home, they're lucky if they get 48 hours in their own bed before getting right back on the road for TV events and live events. That's inhumane. And that's dangerous. And that's where people get hurt. If you're wrestling tired, if you're not getting a lot of sleep or whatever the case may be, that's where people get hurt. An off-season would not work in WWE. People scream off-season. Roman Reigns even said there should be an off-season. An off-season will never work. They have TV contracts. You just can't run clip shows for a month. That's not what they're being paid for. The next time those TV contracts come up for renewal, if they want to build time into the contract to allow for the shows to go dark for a period, then fine, go for it. But the appeal of WWE to a network like Fox or USA is that it's a 52 weeks or maybe 51 weeks a year product year-round. Outside of 24-hour cable news, there is no other programming like that on television. Every sport has an off-season. Most television shows that I can think of have an off-season. They don't just run 52 weeks a year. I mean, again, there may be a couple of exceptions I'm not thinking of. Even game shows. I mean, everything. They all have breaks and sabbaticals. They break everything up into seasons. I mean, Raw and Smackdown, they've got season premieres. They never say season finale, interestingly enough. We only hear about the season premiere. We never hear, it's the season finale of Monday Night Raw. Because it's ludicrous. There is no season finale. They don't have that in WWE. So until that changes, and it won't for at least the next 4 years that they have left on these TV deals, people need to stop talking about an off-season. Start talking about something more practical, which is mandatory rotating time off for the talent. That is far more practical than talking about an off-season where they just shut down for a month or two. Mandatory time off would also help alleviate some of those injuries. But you're right about one thing. They need to scale back the number of house shows, but I think getting rid of them completely would be a bad move. And I'll bet you, I haven't taken a survey of these people, but I would bet you the majority of the roster would say the same thing if you were to ask them. Now, one other point I didn't even mention is the company's relationship with Make-A-Wish. and organizations like Make-A-Wish. Some people may not even realize this, that when they go to each of these cities, and this goes for TV and for the live events, when WWE comes to town, everybody knows, hey, WWE's coming to town. They have talent ready to meet with sick kids backstage in every city. You eliminate house shows, you're eliminating a lot more than just the matches in the ring. So to say that they serve no purpose just isn't true.